Good evening, Fierosians. Good afternoon, Fierosians. Good morning, Fierosians. That's you. If you're watching this, you are now an honorary Fierosian. Welcome. Here we are. Okay, so I'm going to carry on with Fieros' story time here with me, Fieros Reborn, on the channel Fieros Reborn. Okay. All right then. Come on now. Right, so I'm talking about my mental health past, basically. Oh, God. Ward 12. Now, just before I start properly, I will let you know that there's a high likelihood that I will need a poo during this video. And there's an even higher likelihood that I will need a wee during this video. So most likely it will be a wee, but no, yeah, definitely a wee. There's going to be a wee, and if there isn't a wee, then consider yourselves lucky. Oh God, that took a long time to figure out that word, didn't it? Count yourselves lucky if I don't go for a wee. If you're new to this channel, you will notice that I do not edit things, so if I just sit there thinking about a word, you're going to hear the silence of me sitting there thinking about a word. Okay, alrighty then. Oh yeah, so basically probably a wee, maybe a poo. I've done a lot of poo today already, but that's by the by. I'm just saying that if that happens, I'm not going to stop filming. I will go outside into the garden. No, I will go out of the room and poo in a tree, poo in a tree, poo on a tree, poo everywhere around a tree, poo in the toilet. Oh God, what is this? What's happening? What's happening? I will leave the vicinity of the camera in order to go for a turd. So you are safe. You will not see anything. It's illegal to poo on camera anyway, I imagine. Dogs can do it, but we can't. Illegal to poo on camera? What? Okay, let's come on. Let's start now. Ward 12. Here we are. We're going to talk about a very distressing and irritating and depressing subject. Ward 12. When I think of Ward 12, I think about being suicidal. I don't mean it doesn't make me suicidal, but I remember being suicidal, basically. I remember lying in my bed in Ward 12 in my single hospital bed, in my single hospital room, with my double wardrobe over there in the corner, over in the far left. My bed is facing this window thing, and outside the window there's this like little kind of garden area with plants and stuff, but it's not accessible to anyone. I don't know how, I don't know what that I don't know anything about that bit. There was this kind of little garden outside my window, but no one ever went in there, and I don't know if it was even accessible to anyone. I mean, it was just kind of this wild patch of stuff, but it was kind of mystical, I suppose. And then over in the kind of distance there was this wall, right? So you had this kind of gardeny bit and then this wall at the end, and the amount of times I imagined climbing up that wall somehow and making an escape over the wall, yeah, it was a lot of times. Okay. And I would be imagining escaping this place, and then I'd start to feel suicidal and even more depressed because I was like, I'm never going to be able to get over that wall. There's no way you can get over that wall. Like, I couldn't even think of a way to get over the wall. I just imagined myself somehow climbing over it with a rope or whatever. But I didn't have any rope, and there was no way to get rope, and then you'd have to get some kind of grappling hook and stuff, and it's just like something out of a James Bond film or out of some kind of spy movie or an army film or something, or an SAS type of film or a ninja film. But it was not part of my actual situation to have a rope and a grappling hook and to have a carabiner and to be able to like climb my way up a rope over a wall. I'd have to get through this thick window that's bolted down as well, so no. Wasn't going to happen, so that just made me really depressed. So the main reason I was depressed was this lack of freedom. It really got to me. Really, really got to me. Like, it's it's like it's hard to express why it was so important to me to be free. Because I can imagine that some people went in there and they didn't feel that same feeling of being depressed because they were trapped. Maybe they're feeling other feelings as well. But I mean, I guess I'd been so used to being free and excessively free. I mean, like, I'd not had a job, I didn't have a stable home. I'd been from place to place. I would float around. I'd do whatever I wanted. Within my limitations of finances, I would just go wherever I wanted, do whatever I wanted. I didn't care for social etiquette anymore. I'd say whatever I wanted to whoever I wanted because I was, according to the what's that fucking word? Diagnosis. According to the diagnosis I was given, I was displaying disinhibited behavior, which means no inhibitions or lack of inhibitions with regard to speech and behavior. So I could say whatever I wanted and do whatever I wanted, basically. Yeah. So I was used to being really, really free, and then suddenly being plonked into this Ward 12 well, after I'd already escaped one Ward 10, so I guess that gave me a sense that I could get free of things. But this ward didn't seem so easy to escape from. And it is also like, although I'd made this escape from the previous ward, the fact that I'd been caught again, I suppose that just gave me this more pessimistic view of getting free of a second time, because I was like, well, what's the point? Because even if I do get free, then I'll still be caught anyway, because somehow something, I'll be found or whatever. And I'm not a genius escape artist, all right? I managed to do that using wits and cunning the first time around to escape Ward 10, but I'm not like some kind of fugitive. I don't know about all that stuff. I only managed to do it because there was a little flaw in the system that I managed to work, but I'm not kind of like able to avoid and evade capture. So I was like, oh god, I can't even escape. So thinking about that makes me feel like a failure as well. So not only am I trapped, but I can't escape. So I feel like there's a sense of failure around a potential escape. And really, all I wanted was to be free and out and about again, outside, because I couldn't be outside. The only place that you could be outside was in this very small 10-meter square garden, which was for the smokers. Not the same garden that was outside my window. That was a different piece of garden outside my window. But there was a kind of 10 by 10 patch of kind of paved and gravelled garden with a few plants in there, but it really wasn't a garden. It was more of a paving and gravel area with a little kind of sheltered bit for smoking under and ashtrays and stuff. And I did a bit of exercise in there, as I mentioned previously, but it wasn't outside really, because the outside was up there and there were 4 walls all around you. So there's your outside up there, and you kind of, I mean, technically you are outside in that area, but it's not a freedom of outside. It's not like there's no expansiveness to that at all. It's very contained. 10 by 10, it's very contained. So it might have even been less than 10 meters, more like 5 or 6. No, 7, 8, 9, around 10 meters by 10 meters, let's say that. Between 5 and 10 meters by 5 and 10 meters, okay? So, yeah. And it's really important to me to get things like fresh air, exercise, walking, being in touch with nature, seeing people, just feeling free, knowing that I am free, knowing that I am a free citizen, knowing that I'm allowed to go into wherever, into shops, into coffee shops, into fields, parks, whatever, to be a free person. So being trapped is the main element of the feeling of depression that I was experiencing on the ward. The feeling of being trapped. which was a literal situation. That was the situation. I was physically contained. I was physically trapped. So I don't exactly know how that translates into a feeling, but it did. Because I can imagine that some people who are in that situation, as I said, although they are physically trapped, maybe they don't feel trapped. Maybe they feel like that this is a good place for them to be because it's helping them and healing them and whatever, and that they want to be there for as long as they need to be in order to feel better. But I was not of that orientation, shall we say. I was not in an optimistic state of mind at all. I started off being kind of optimistic, like thinking I could change things. I did that protest that I mentioned where I pissed myself on the floor and refused to use the services because I thought that maybe they would pay attention to me and listen to me and like ask me whatever and believe me when I said that I felt like I shouldn't have been in there, but maybe I should have been in there. Especially if I'm behaving like that, pissing myself and stuff. But it's kind of like I don't want to trivialize myself because I could easily just like take the piss out of myself. Well, quite literally, I could easily just take the piss out of that situation, but it's quite a sad situation. It's quite a tragic situation, and yeah, it's got a funny side to it because I was behaving strangely. But overall, that strange behaviour and the situation is a tragedy. It's not a comedy. It's a tragedy because I'm in a situation that is not good for me. I didn't feel it to be good for me. Maybe it was good for me overall. Other people would say it was good for me, but I didn't feel it to be good for me. And I'm behaving in ways that are undignified. And I'm in a situation I don't want to be in. I can't get out of it. I feel that's undignified in itself. I don't like I'm not getting the care that I think I should be getting, as in I don't feel like the people there care about me. I feel like I've just become part of the system. I feel like I'm being ignored. I feel like they just want me to take my medication and that somehow they think that miraculously this is going to change me. So I feel like I'm just a kind of tiny little ant in a massive ant hive or something. Yeah, it's not a nice feeling. And everyone who's in there is going through some level of suffering, and some of them quite a lot of deep suffering. So one woman who was in there would just cry constantly, virtually constantly. She would cry. So she'd come up to me and she was crying about something, and then maybe she'd have like a kind of small smile, and then she'd go back to crying. She was just constantly crying, and I didn't help that I couldn't actually understand what she was saying most of the time because she didn't have very good English either. So I think she was Romanian and didn't have very good English skills. And she was always crying. Her name was Maria. And okay, so another part of this is that in Ward 12, near the beginning, I went through this phase where people thought that I was Jesus. Because I had kind of longer hair and I had a beard and I was like trying to heal people and stuff. Well, I was healing them from my perspective. Let's stop pretending I was healing them, okay? I was healing them. I felt like I was healing them. I did some healing with Maria by listening to her and telling her that I was God and she should pray to me and stuff. And she was going to be okay. So, comedy and tragedy, because that is a tragedy as well, I mean, she's in pain and I'm there as this person who thinks he's God, and maybe I'm being helpful, maybe I'm not being helpful. Who really knows what the situation is? I mean, I did listen to her and I did give her this kind of unconditional attention. Yeah. Anyway, so I went through this period where people in the ward thought I was Jesus, and I just kind of went along with it because I kind of thought that I was Jesus. I mean, I don't know if I actually told anyone that I was Jesus or if it just sort of came up and I just rolled with it. I was like, yeah, I am. So there was this one guy, he came up to me, he's like, are you Jesus? People are saying you're Jesus. And I was like, yeah, I am. And he's like, oh, really? And he talked to me for a bit and he went, no, you're not Jesus. That guy went out as well quite quickly. So this is the thing, like, the thing with this Ward 12, another aspect of it as well, is that as soon as you get to know people, they fuck off. So I mentioned this before, the revolving door thing. It's a bit like when I was in the hostel in New York. So you get to know people, and then they fuck off. It's strange, actually, as well. Just a quick point here. I've just taken my hands out of my pockets to try and be more expressive, and I feel like that has shaken me off and thrown me off course. And I was just thinking about how I have my hands is a bit like I'm in a straitjacket. You know, I've got my arms down like this, and I'm talking as though I'm in a straitjacket, which is really weird. Yet I find it difficult to actually talk with my hands about this subject. So maybe I'll leave my hands in for the moment, and then maybe as I go further through this, I'll feel more comfortable to be able to talk with my hands at the same time. But that's an interesting point to note, because I was never put in a straitjacket. I think straitjackets were for higher security prisons and psychiatric wards, but this was like minimum security psychiatric ward. It wasn't. The only real like things stopping you from escaping were your own psychology, if that makes sense, so your own thinking. So you could escape if you wanted to. It wouldn't have been that hard to, but most people didn't because they I guess the system just had enough oppression in it psychologically for you to think, oh, I'm not going to try, because there are a lot of people about, and there was a high likelihood of you being caught. But if you were really determined, you could escape, as I did in Ward 12. So maybe I should talk about that now. So I did manage to escape from Ward 12, as well as escaping from Ward 10. They call it absconding, technical term there. But so the way I escaped this time is, so I'd been talking to this friend Mark. He was a tall guy, chubby guy, played a lot of pool and had a messiah complex, a bit like mine, but his was more scientifically oriented. So the way that he was going to save the world, messianically, was by inventing these highly complex ideas for how we could move from the planet Earth to, I don't know, somewhere else in space, and he was calculating all the resources and stuff, and he was generate more resources and things, and it was pretty intense and pretty
absolutely unfeasible and completely what do you call that when an idea just won't work, and is based upon a hell of a lot of kind of incorrect assumptions. Well, it was that. It was unsound. It was an unsound plan, and it was just his mad genius thinking it was genius when it wasn't. It was just kind of, maybe there was some intelligence there for him to even be thinking about it, but practically and logically and in terms of feasibility, his plan just was not ever going to work because, for one thing, it was mad and no one would ever fucking listen to him. But it basically amounted to somehow getting a load of spaceships going off and colonizing another planet or something, which, okay, that will be possible probably at some, well, that's going to be possible at some point in our future, but not the way that he was doing it. Not the way that he was thinking about it and doing it, just because where was he getting his data from? He was just making up data, it's just, data, just randomly making up data and then doing calculations based on made up data. So yeah, it's silliness, total silliness. Anyway, that's also a tragedy as well as being funny, because this person genuinely believes in his own madness, and that's a tragedy. So he's never going to get there. Anyway, so yeah, I escaped. I was talking to Mark about this this feeling that I was having, like I was trapped and there was nothing I could do about my situation, and like I was feeling unhappy, and I just felt like there was nothing going right and stuff, and I was depressed. And we were playing pool in the games room part of, so
I mentioned it before, but the kind of I don't even know what to call it. It's like a dine. It was a dining room, so you had the kitchen bit, the canteen. You had the dining area. Then you had some games equipment, which was a pool table, a piano, um, a table tennis table, and then you had this bookshelf with puzzles and books and stuff over in the corner. Oh, and there was a foosball table as well. Double doors to get into that, and that was your dining room and games room, all in one. So we were playing pool. We used to play pool a lot. Anyway, and so while we were chatting, he mentioned something that some philosopher had said, which was something like, if you're not happy with your situation, then do something to change it. Or move the parameters or something like that, make a difference, make a change. And I thought, well, what does that mean in this context? And he said, don't know. And I said, what, are you suggesting that I try and escape? And he said, well, it's up to you. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe that, is worth a try. And then I think it must have been shortly after that or around that same time, or it might have even been before, this other guy who I knew from there, his name was Calvin, and this other guy I knew called Calvin had done an escape, which was fairly simple and straightforward, which he just kind of bashed open one of the doors in that games room. There was a door at the back, which I think is a fire exit door. And I'm not sure why more people didn't just do this, but no one did it. He just bashed it open and just kind of stormed out. I don't know what happened next, honestly, but he escaped. And because when you bash open that door, I think it was like, had one of those, I don't know exactly how he did it, because I don't know whether it was actually, it wasn't one of those doors where you just push this thing and it opens easily. He really had to force it open with a bash, so it kind of cracked the latch open or something. So he bashed through it, got out. It didn't break it or anything, and just ran off or something. So I'd seen him do that, so I knew that was possible, basically. And what with this conversation with Mark over the pool table about escaping and change your situation, if you don't like your situation, then do something to change it. So I thought, okay, well, I'll do that. And I remember umming and ahhing about it for a little while and thinking, oh, well, should I and shouldn't I? I've already done this before, and is it going to work as well? And what do I do after that? Because I didn't even know where that was. So, like, I didn't know what was outside that door. It just looked like some greenery stuff, some kind of wooded area. I was in Ascot, which is not a place I was familiar with at that time. I'm still not familiar with it. But I'm certainly familiar with the back of that hospital. I don't even think that hospital's there in that same... No, I think maybe that part is still there. I've not been there for ages, actually, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so I ummed and ahed about it for a while, and I just remembered this guy, he changed his name later on to Kev, but the first name I knew him by was Calvin, so he was Calvin at that time. He later changed his name to Kev, and then he likes to change his name a lot every now and again, just for the fun of it. Anyway, Calvin, I'd seen him bash through that, and that came back to me quite a few times. I was thinking, well, it is possible, I could do that. I didn't know what was on the other side. I didn't know what I'd do after that, really. But I guess I don't know what I thought, but I remember I picked up some money, maybe my phone as well, maybe my little rucksack. I always had a rucksack. And so I decided to do this. I can't remember exactly what triggered my decision to do it on that particular day at that particular time. Maybe it was just like, oh, fuck this, I'm going to try it, and whatever. And it's usually inspired by something I read in some book or other. I go, oh, this gives me the idea to actually go and do it. So yeah, but I can't remember exactly what made me decide, right, I'm going to do this. But I did. So I did exactly the same thing as Calvin had done. I just went up to the exit door, bashed it open somehow, because I just seen him. He kind of just kicked it in the centre, and it just sort of flung open. But I had the sense that you had to kick it quite hard, otherwise it wasn't going to open. And so I kicked that door, went out, the alarm went off. And of course, from the perspective of the people who worked there, they didn't know, for example, who had left and where they had gone. All they knew at that time was obviously the door was open and the alarm's gone off, because that's what happens when that door opens. The alarm gets triggered and it's like beep beep beep, and so people were kind of like, there's mayhem among the nurses for a while about what the hell's going on. And also think about it, like other people could have escaped through that door as well. So there was, okay, what's going on? Someone's bashed through the door. It's time to close the door and chase the person and find out where he's gone and what's going on. But I obviously knew that I was going to have to make a quick exit. So I bashed through the door, as I say, alarm went off. I just had the sensation that people were scurrying around, wondering what the hell was going on. And immediately outside of that back door is a wooded area, which I had no knowledge of, as in, like, I didn't know the terrain of it. I didn't know where it was. You know, I knew I was in Ascot, but I didn't know whereabouts really in Ascot, because remember, like, the first time I've actually been to this hospital is in the back of a police van. So I'd gone from Slough police station in the back of a police van to Ascot Heatherwood, Ward 12. So I didn't know where the hell I was. You know, I knew I was in Ascot, but I didn't actually know the terrain. I didn't. I suppose I'd been to Ascot before for work and stuff, because I'd done the Ascot races as a waiter. But I didn't know the layout of Ascot in relation to the hospital. And I certainly didn't know the layout of the wooded area behind the hospital and where the hell that was going to come out to, and, you know, what the hell. So anyway, but having my wits about me and having this kind of spidey sense for, like a homing pigeon, to find things, I just walked really, really quickly, maybe ran a little bit to begin with, through this wooded area. Really nice bit of wooded area, by the way. It was had this very strange, ancient, mystical feeling. I suppose it's one of those places that no one really goes to, because it's like out the back of a hospital, and it wasn't like an area of general public walking. It was actually by the side of a railway track. So a lot of this story relates to me finding things and doing things by the side of railway tracks. But yeah, so this bit of wood outside the back of the hospital, after walking through it quickly and being aware that there were people looking for me, so I had to try and get into cover as quickly as possible and get away from that door and away from the surrounding area as quickly as possible if I wanted to escape fully, you know, because I could still hear this alarm going on in the background, right? And I had my backpack on, and I was just rushing through this wooded area, trying not to fall over. Yeah. Making sure I didn't fall over or tripping on little twigs and branches and stuff. So it was a very kind of hectic feeling, you know, my heart's pounding. I can kind of see people like somewhere over there. Like, I just have this sense that there are people looking for me, and I can kind of see people moving about, like, on the edges of my awareness, but I'm not sure I don't know if that's an actual sight that I saw, or if it's an imagination that I imagined that was going on. I knew it was going on because it's obvious that they're looking for me. I know they're looking for me, and I know they're looking for me immediately. So yeah, I went rushing through this wooded area, and it came out on the back. I wish I kind of spent more time in that wooded area, because it was quite nice. But there was no time, so I just had to go. Another high-speed chase. Yeah. And it kind of, it's ended up next to a railway track, which was a bit scary, because railway trains, coming any moment. But I figured, okay, railway track, there's going to be a station at some point. So I followed the railway line, not very close to it, like off to the side, so that I wasn't in any danger, right? And followed that along the left-hand side of it, and walked, changing my orientation now, and walked down there, right? Thinking, okay, at some point there's going to be a station, and it's probably going to be Ascot Station. And what do you know, after about 5, 10, 15 minutes, I don't know how long exactly, of walking, I got to Ascot train station, and I was like, bada bing, bada boom. I think I had like £21. It's a bit of a strange number to remember, but it was either £14 or £21 or £21.40, something like that. And so I had this money in my pocket, which I don't exactly know where I'd got it from, but it was mine. It wasn't nicked or anything. It was actually mine. I had this money in my pocket, and I had my phone on me as well. But I got to the Ascot train station, and there were taxi cabs there, and I just said, "Can you take me to blah 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 address in Taplow, which is the place where I'd been staying before at Cherry's house with Cherry and Rowan." If you remember from the previous parts of the story, I'd been staying with a kind of acquaintance that became a friend called Rowan and Cherry. Cherry was Rowan's mum, so Rowan and Cherry. We've been staying in their house in their loft room while I waited for my Section 2 of the Mental Health Act to run its course. So I decided to go back to there because I felt like that was the only place that I would be safe, because I didn't feel safe to come back to this house, my family house, my parents' house, because they would just deliver me back to the mental health services. So I decided to go back to Cherry's house in Taplow. And, you know, people don't really tend to ask questions if you act normal. So I managed to kind of get my breath down to a normal rate before I asked for the cab. Because obviously I'd been running, and I was had that adrenaline rush going on of being scared that I was going to be caught, and rushing and rushing and rushing. But I managed to slow myself down and act normal, and just asked to get a cab to go to Taplow, to Cherry's address in Taplow. And the cabbie was like, yeah, fine. And I had enough money, so everything was fine. And again, I couldn't believe I'd gotten away with it. I was like, wow, this is really easy. You know, I'm really working well on this. So I felt this exhilaration of being free again, which was great actually, and I'm glad I did it. So yeah, I mean, I got the cab and I got to Cherry's house. They weren't in at that time though, so I was locked outside and just sat outside their door going. "Ugh." And I had a phone call from I think probably my dad and then my mum, and maybe I called Cherry. I don't know, but I remember speaking to at least one of my parents, if not both of them, about the fact that I'd escaped, and they were trying to convince me to go back, and I didn't want to go back. But then I got angry and I put the phone down on them. But then again, I was like outside Cherry's house, so the plan wasn't really going to plan, as in it wasn't working out how I thought it would, because I had just assumed that they would be in and I'd be able to go in and everything would be fine. But they weren't in, so I was just outside and I was in the cold and I started feeling miserable, and I was like, this escape plan has not worked. I don't really have any options now. I mean, I could wait for them, but it's going to be ages. And by that time also, somehow someone's going to have alerted people, and I don't know. I was suddenly kind of going, this is not working, this is not working, this is not working, this is not working, this is not working how I thought it would work. And I felt really glum, actually. So I'd got my freedom, but the plan had only gone so far. I guess if Cherry had been there, things might have been slightly different. But I think that probably, as I understand it, by that point, there might have been some communication between Cherry and my parents. So I think she sort of knew more about what the situation was. So really, I was fucked either way. You know, I couldn't have really stayed there in the same way that I did before, because I think that situation would have been different. Because she was in the know now about why I even needed to stay there, which was because I wanted to evade the mental health services. So that probably wasn't going to happen. So I remember either receiving another call or speaking to my parents again in some way on the phone. And I decided myself to go back to the ward. But the reason that decision came about actually was, again, because I read something in a book. I made a lot of decisions based on things I'd read in books. So there was this part of the Book of Secrets that talks about situations and your level of commitment to a situation. And so the author Deepak Chopra talks about like varying levels of commitment to certain situations. How so, like, you might be toe dipping in situations. You might go in as far as the first wall of pain. So if you might go into a situation and an obstacle comes up and it's like a wall, and then you realize that was your level of commitment, so you bail on it. Then you might have a deeper level of commitment, which is something like, I'm just making this up and paraphrasing, just kind of remembering vaguely what he was saying, and this might be wrong, but there's another level of commitment, which is where you go through to achieve something meaningful by overcoming a few obstacles in that situation. And then there's a total level of commitment, which is you are totally committed to that goal, or seeing the total fulfillment of that situation all the way through to the end. And I read this particular part of the book and I sort of went, oh, okay. Well, with regard to the situation of being in hospital, I was not committed to being in the hospital. I did not want to be in the hospital. But something about what he'd written there made me think, okay, well, if I'm going to get the fullness of this situation, I need to see it all the way through. I need to go into it fully. I need to accept every part of it. I need to embrace this situation, and I need to commit to it and go all the way through it. So also, there'd been this other guy in the ward who was around the same sort of age as me, like between 18 and 21 or 22, right? And I felt a kind of connection to him because he was, as I say, of the same sort of age. He was a photographer. I was an artist. He would listen to music quite often on his headphones. He had his headphones around his neck all the time. He was young. He dressed quite cool. His name was Christian. And what else? And so he got let out before I did. And I tried to escape at one point when he was going out. Maybe he was going out for leave, actually, but I don't know. He was going out with his mum. Maybe that was his last, like he was going out to leave there, to not be an inpatient anymore, but it could have just been a period of a few hours. I can't remember exactly. I didn't really know how the whole leave system worked. Anyway, as he was going out with his mum, I tried to slip through the door with them at the same time. But he stopped me, or his mum stopped me, or both of them stopped me. And he said to me, this guy of a similar age to me, this was a previous occasion, by the way. He said to me, look, just do your time, man. Like, do your time, as though it's a prison sentence. He's like, do your time and you'll get out. So I went, oh, okay, on that occasion. And so during this occasion when I had escaped and I'd gone through the forest and got the cab and gone back to Cherry's, and Cherry wasn't there, and I'd read the book, it says, you need to go through this whole of the situation to achieve fulfillment or completion, right? This idea of this other guy who said, do your time, came back to me as well. So it was all sort of, the universe was telling me, you need to go through this situation. You need to complete the situation. So another aspect of it as well was that by that point I had realized that the odds were against me. It was not easy to maintain being away from hospital, being away from the mental health services, because you had the police, you had my parents, the whole situation was conspiring now to get me back to hospital. So I just kind of relented, basically, and I surrendered, and I said, look, okay, I will go back, and I'll go back by choice, and I will have decided that. So in a way, for me, that was also, it was important to me that some part of this was now on my terms, even though the situation was funneling me in that direction anyway. Because I had escaped, I had that sense of freedom again. It gave me a feeling of some power or some influence over my situation, that then I was the one who was choosing now to go back to the hospital. That was important to me, to feel like I had some power in my own life, that I had some decision making ability in my own life. And that was, it was meaningful actually to have escaped, so that I felt like I could leave, if I wanted to, that was an option, but then that it was my choice to go back and to see this thing through, because I'd realised this is not going to change. They're going to keep hounding me and keep hounding me and keep, trying to get me to take the medicines. And, I can run away to wherever and meet new people and live with them or whatever, but this is always going to be there in the background as something that is going to chase me and hound me. So I realized, look, if I escape, I'm going to be caught. So I may as well just go back and do my time. So I did. I told my parents that, yeah, okay, I'm going to do it. I'll go back. But it's my choice. And it was very important to me to say that this is my choice. Because then it felt like it was a personal ownership, that I was doing this for myself now. Because I wanted the situation to improve. I didn't believe what everyone else believed about me. I didn't believe that I had this mental health problem and stuff. I still believed, and I still do believe, that people were misinterpreting my behavior massively, misinterpreting my mind and my emotions and stuff, and my spirituality. They were really completely misinterpreting it. But that was the situation. And the only way that the situation was going to change is if I engaged with that situation on those terms, because I couldn't change it on my own terms anymore. There was nothing I could do. As I said, like I'd escaped, that was my own terms, but I'd hit another wall, which was Cherry and Rowan went in. All right, so maybe if I'd stayed outside their house for a few more hours, they would have returned. But then I can't see how that would have worked. I really can't, because they'd be like, why are you here? What's all this? Or I don't know. It's just, it wasn't worth it anymore. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go back. My parents were trying to convince me to do it anyway, but I felt like I had made a decision myself, and that was important to me. So what actually happened next was I think I must have told them where I was, and I got picked up, or I got a cab up. No, I'm not sure exactly what happened. I must have got picked up. I got picked up by my mum or my dad or both, in the car, and got brought back to here, from Taplow to here. And it was quite an emotional car journey, actually, because I felt this sense of, I hadn't seen people on the street for ages. I hadn't seen the freedom of people walking about. And it's hard to describe just how much of a contrast that was. There was a real emotionally moving contrast to see people who were free, when I had been in this situation for, I don't know exactly how long, but for a while, a few weeks, where all I'd known is containment, walls, boundaries, and to be back in a car, like seeing these people on just a normal street, walking up and down, going to the shop or whatever, pushing a pram, and people driving around and going over the pedestrian crossing and all this normal, really normal stuff that you do when you're free in the outside air. Seeing all that really got to me. It really deeply made me understand the value of freedom, personal freedom. And I cried in that car, or I shed some tears of understanding about the importance of freedom and the nature of freedom there. And it was kind of strange how it's the same road. I mean, I've been down that road loads of times before, and I still go down that road now. But in those moments when I was in that car, after having escaped from hospital for the first time, as in I was out of hospital for the first time in a while, out in the fresh air, seeing all the normal people walking around doing normal things in a free way with no walls containing them. To see all that, it changed the whole understanding of that street. It changed the whole feeling of that street. So whereas it had been boring, normal, mundane, grey, nothing miraculous at all before, then at this moment when I was in that car seeing all these people walking along, and just, it was still boring and mundane from one perspective, but from my perspective it was the most miraculous thing. How free everything was, and how free I was in that moment, and how beautiful life is when you're free, to know that you can just breathe the fresh air, polluted fresh air, and see the trees. That was important as well, that I saw the trees around, and the little bud things, whatever you call them, buds and flowers and leaves and whatever, and the sunlight and the clouds and the sky, and the people, and it was just expansive and open, and I felt this really deep appreciation for life and for freedom. Yeah. But it was short-lived, because I was going to go back to hospital, and I did go back to hospital. But what happened next was, we came back to here, and we had a few hours to wait or something before I went back, and I'd agreed to go back at a certain time or something. And so my mum and I just spent some time in the house, and so I had long hair at that time, pretty long hair. It was kind of down to there, I think, by that point. And I don't know, I was just so vulnerable and lost and shriveled. I think disheveled is a word. That I was very needy, and I just kind of needed attention and loving care and stuff. And I don't know how exactly, but we decided that Mum would wash my hair and comb it and dry it for me. like a little girl, basically. But it was really nice, because it was just very peaceful. And I was majorly depressed, and I was in this really shitty situation in my life. And I had a few hours of freedom and a few hours of calm in this tempest of chaos. And it was peaceful, but there was depression still in me, but it was peaceful overall. Because my mum just... Oh, God. Just washed my hair and blow dried my hair and combed my hair. And didn't really say much. It was just very calm and soothing and nice. And so I had this kind of little brief oasis of pleasantness in what had been this tempest, this storm of chaos. So it's the eye of the storm. Yeah, that's a good metaphor actually. So I come through all this turbulence, escaped all this madness rushing around, escaping authorities and uncertainty, insecurity, and instability, tornado everywhere. And then this is the eye of the storm, this calm, brief interlude where everything is peaceful and still and just soothing and relaxing and quiet. And then it starts again. But you're on the way out then, you see. So yeah, so we had that moment. It was very calm. When I think of that memory, it feels like there's darkness because it's becoming nighttime, but it's also stillness. There's depression there, which is annoying because that was part of my state at that time. So I was depressed and I was feeling hopeless and stuff, but I was glad to not have to perform in any way, not have to escape anything anymore, just to be taken care of, and that wasn't running away from anything anymore. Oh God. And so yeah, my mum washed my hair, dried my hair. We just sat at the dinner table after that and just kind of chatted, not much, just nothing particularly consequential, but it was just quiet and it was calm and it was relaxed and it was the eye of the storm, this quiet little period of stillness. Probably that was one of the only periods of stillness in my life between being born and probably about the age of 28. It's just this eye of the storm, this quiet little oasis moment of nothing going wrong, no fear, no one chasing me or hounding me, okay? Because even though I'm going to be picked up later on from this little oasis and I am going to go back to hospital, but that is my decision. So there's a sense of surrenderedness to it, I've surrendered, I am going to do this. Rather than it being people chasing me and me running away. It was no, now I enter, now I choose. So, yeah, so we waited, sat around the dinner table, just me and my mum, I think. Maybe my dad came in later, I'm not sure. And then I got taken back to hospital. I'd like to say that things got better from then on, but they didn't really. Maybe they did long term. Maybe that was the beginning. I don't know. But that was an important little oasis. Also the understanding of freedom, really knowing what freedom is, came from that contrast of being in the prison psychiatric ward to seeing the vast expanse of sky, of people, of roads, of fields. It's amazing how, if you are contained for a certain period of time, how big the world looks afterwards. Just like, whoa, it's intense. You didn't even realize how big the fucking world is. Some people can find that intimidating, but I found it absolutely liberating because freedom, no walls and corridors to contain me. However, after that, after I came out of hospital, I know I'm skipping forward. There's more to talk about in Ward 12, by the way. But I'm just going to go off here and there. So uh, after I got out of hospital, the sense of there being walls on my experience lingered for a long time afterwards. So I wrote a lyric in one of my songs that says "cages behind the walls," which means like, so these walls, okay, we know that you can walk through the door and stuff, but there is also like a cage beyond the wall. So it's not even. I felt like there was actually a kind of cage on my experience. So, like, if I looked across the fence, like outside in my back garden, I would feel like there's a cage behind it. It's like some kind of barrier had been like imposed or something by me being in hospital. It instilled this feeling of there being a limitation on my experience. So, like everywhere I went, I felt like behind everything I saw, there was this barrier, there was this limitation, there was this sense of no, like no further. And that was a depressing feeling because it's like I couldn't shake it. So, having been in hospital in this contained situation for so long, um, put in me that sense that there is a a barrier to life, an experience to life, a barrier to experience, like a kind of limitation on the world. Like, so you look down the road and just feel like you're hitting barriers upon barriers upon barriers, kind of thing. And that even the furthest thing you can see, beyond that, there's a cage. There's something to contain it. That means that you are always trapped, basically, is the feeling. And it's very, very, very subtle. So it was very hard to unpick that and to get over it because it was there in the background, in everything, this sense of limitation. And it's also kind of hard to put into words and define it because it's like it sort of infected everything. There's a cage behind even this room. There's something containing me beyond the walls. There's a cage beyond the walls, cages behind the walls, right? There's a feeling of being contained in every situation that you are in. And wherever you go, there's something trapping you from going beyond it or further from it. Yeah, so, but that's gone now. Thank God. I now look outside and I see the sky and I just feel infinity behind it. I don't feel a cage behind it. I feel expansiveness. I feel like I look across the fence and I don't see a barrier. I just see clear air. I just see clear sky. Whereas before I just saw like the garden itself had a cage around it. And there's like a cage between me and the sky, or beyond the sky there was a cage beyond the sky, cages upon cages upon cages. But now, as far as I look and as far as I see, I mean, even if I was to kind of look through this room, all I see is infinity expanding beyond it. So if I imagine what's beyond this room, it's just more and more infinity. There's no cages anymore. It's just expansiveness. So that's nice, but that took a long time. And that was part of my depression, that feeling of can't escape. I'm trapped. But even more insidious than a thinking, just a subtle sensation of there being a boundary, a containment to life, a containment to experience, a containment to everything, which is very unsettling. Unsettling in such a profound and deep way that it was so hard to put your finger on, but you could just know that it was there. And it's like something it's both minor and also completely insidious and completely disempowering. So it's minor because it feels small. Okay, oh yeah, it's just a cage behind the wall, or it's just a cage on experience or a barrier on experience. But that was so infectious. It just infected everything. And so it was both small because it was hard to detect, but you knew it was there, and yet very, very powerful because that was the thing that was really making me feel depressed. And you had to kind of go through lots of unpicking of thoughts and feelings to even get to that sensation of go, there's that feeling of boundary again. Anyway, so we're coming to the end of the session now. Ward 12, well, escape from Ward 12, I suppose, is what this has been about, really, hasn't it? So I returned to the ward. Now, I have to talk about this thing I did, which was I tried to appeal my section. So I tried to appeal the decision for me to be sectioned, which I went through what is called a mental health tribunal. So that is on the cards for what we're going to talk about coming up. There's also stuff I need to talk about, other like characters, other people who are in the ward with me, both patients and nurses and doctors. I feel like I need to cover more of that stuff. There's a lot to go through in this Ward 12 stuff, all right? So I was in there for 2.5 months, but it was a very intense 2.5 months. So, I don't think I could come up with much material for the last 2.5 months of my life. Maybe I could, but this was a very impactful, traumatic and intense and difficult period in my life, 2.5 months, that there's a lot of stuff to pick through and to expand upon and to release, because obviously as I tell the story and I'm going through these little bits and parts and explaining them, when I explain them, it's kind of like a little bit gets off my chest and I'm done with that little bit and I've said everything about that, so I don't need to repeat it anymore. So it's liberated, it's free, it can float off into that infinity outside, into the universe, So there you go, that's today's session, Ward 12, Escape from Ward 12. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here. That might have been a difficult session for you to watch. It was certainly emotional for me. And I will speak to you soon. Thanks for watching. I've been Fieros on the channel Fieros Reborn. And share this around if you've liked it. And let's get some people talking about this stuff, mental health topics and the mental health system and just being human, and being real, being honest, feeling. Right, I'm off. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. Bye bye.